Viewers are advised the following program includes coarse language and violence.
Tonight,
innocent people were killed over me.
the story no one was game to touch.
He is the manifestation of pure evil.
A little girl, her violent, deranged,
Are you a violent man?
serial-killing father.
Well, I used to shoot rabbits. I suppose that's pretty violent.
The most frightening man in Australia.
People have to understand how bad this man was.
Possessive. It's mine is mine, and I'm going to have what's mine.
2 shootings, 4 murders, and 5 bombings.
He was spitting in the eye of justice in Australia.
I've been framed by police.
He almost got away with it.
He's a very, very clever boy.
Now, the riveting inside story.
You are in danger. This man is a total psychopath.
The vital breakthrough
He's bled everywhere.
that trapped the family court bomber. How this confrontation changed everything. And in a major new development, is there a new victim? Effectively disappeared off the face of the planet.
Well, let me terrify you some more.
Hello, I'm Ross Coulthart. Of all the investigations I've covered, this is the one that's given me the greatest satisfaction to solve. A serial killer who came so close to getting away with it. He maimed children, widowed wives, and assassinated judges. And tonight, in a sinister new development, did Leonard John Warwick murder his own sister? Warwick was the madman amongst us, a former soldier, former fireman, a crack shot with a very big grudge, the family court bomber. For detectives, the question was not so much who done it, but how do we prove it? And for 30 years, they didn't have an answer. Then, on a cold winter's morning, Len Warwick walked in front of Channel 7's cameras, and the coldest of cold cases suddenly got very hot.
I've got a red dot.
That means you're rolling.
Yep, yes, please, quick.
He's going.
The day I confronted Len Warwick was the beginning of the end for him.
Fuck off, stupid. I have no interest in promoting your funny little show.
But in all honesty, some feared it might be the end for me.
How desperate you are
Why don't you
your
make a comment?
ratings, okay?
From the moment my team and I began investigating this madman, we were warned we were putting our lives at risk.
Hey? Fuck off.
Look, you are in danger. This man is a total psychopath.
Leonard Warwick's mind is an evil place, and few people know it better than retired detective Kevin Woods. For more than 30 years, Warwick was more than a nemesis to Woods. He was an obsession, different from every other suspect the decorated cop had ever pursued. Because he was the one, the only one, that got away. And for Woods, in more ways than one, it nearly killed him.
I was extremely worried because a witness that I interviewed said he was looking for my address. So he is very, very concerned. This boy didn't muck around. I've never met a person as dangerous as what Leonard Warwick is. He stopped at nothing in his quest to keep custody of his daughter. He took it personally because everybody that stood in his way, be it judges or lawyers, All the church members who helped to hide the daughter, he went after all of them.
He fought very, very hard to keep you, didn't he?
Yeah.
Why? What is it about your dad's personality that made him fight? Do you think he really loved you?
Yeah, and possessive. What's mine is mine, and I'm going to have what's mine.
40 years ago, Trudy Warwick was a little girl at the centre of a bitter custody dispute. Her mother, Andrea, battled for years to keep her. But her father, Len, continually defied orders of the family court. Why was Leonard Warwick so motivated to murder?
I believe he is a psychopath who wouldn't take no for an answer. He stopped at nothing in his quest to keep custody of his daughter. He took it personally.
Innocent people were killed over me.
2 shootings, 4 murders, and 5 bombings. So what I've got here is an interview that Len Warwick did back in 1986. I just want you to watch it and...
Oh, look at him. Oh, my God.
When Len Warwick was named as prime suspect for the family court attacks, he gave one interview.
What sort of a person do you think would want to kill a family court judge?
A person that was probably disturbed, very upset.
Have you ever been upset at a decision against you in the family court?
Not quite that upset, Terry.
Are you a violent man?
No, Terry, I'm not.
I remember that
What's the
question.
most violent thing you've done?
Well, I used to shoot rabbits. I suppose that's pretty violent.
How violent was Len Warwick?
Very violent, very mind-controlling, very physical.
And is that why you chose to leave him?
Yes. I wouldn't be alive today if I didn't leave him. He'd come home and if he didn't have a good day, he'd come straight in and start whacking. The night I left him, he had me pinned down in the lounge room and he had his foot with his fire brigade boots on, stomping it, kicking into me.
Fearing for her life, Andrea fled from the house, leaving her young daughter inside.
I just ran. I ran out, I got the keys and I unlocked the door and I just ran.
It was the last straw for Andrea, who'd married Len 5 years before. For her own protection, she asked her brother Stephen to go back with her to collect Trudy.
Stephen went up, knocked on the front door. Len opened the door and Steve said, "Look, mate, we just want the baby. Just hand the baby over." And that was it. And Len just slammed the door.
Eventually, with the help of the family court, Andrea got Trudy back. They moved in with Stephen, who now became a target of Len Warwick's anger. Let's go back to February 1980. What happened?
That night, my brother was killed in the house and taken from the house while my daughter and I slept in the house.
Late that night, Stephen finished work at Revesby Workers' Club and walked home.
Andrea and Trudy slept in the front bedroom, closest to the front of the house, and Stephen slept in the back bedroom. Stephen came home, went to bed, and somebody came in and shot him in the head and carried him out.
He was shot dead in his bed at night, and his body carried away and dumped in the Hawkesbury River.
Was Len Warwick strong enough to do that? Was he capable of doing that?
Yes, he was a solid
Firefighter, he's got to be.
He's got to be.
Hitch him over your shoulder and carry him out of a burning building. They all
do
learn that.
When Andrea woke the next morning, she wasn't concerned, thinking that Stephen must have stayed over with his girlfriend. It was only later that the police found tiny specks of blood on Stephen's bedroom wall. Stephen was missing for 6 days. So where was Stephen found?
Cowan Creek.
He'd been in the water for a few days and floated to the surface, despite having 11 house bricks tied around him, so it was pretty rugged.
Clearly murder.
Clearly, yeah.
No doubt about that.
No doubt about it. You can see the gunshot wound in the head.
Mick McGann was a local detective on the case at the time. How would a murderer conceal the noise and the clatter and the clamour that's made when somebody's being killed?
Probably the way I'd think about it is putting a cushion or some other device over the end of the barrel.
Did your dad ever show you any weapons in the house?
Oh, show me any weapons. We used to go rabbit shooting, fox shooting, you know. So, yeah, I saw rifles and bullets and whatnot.
He was a crack shot?
Yeah.
If Len did murder Stephen, why would he have murdered him?
Well, what better way to get back at the family who were helping Andrea to get away from him than to kill the only son? And Stephen was the first one who approached him to try and get the child off him.
4 months after Stephen died, there was a judge murdered in Woollahra.
That's right.
Judge Opus shot at point-blank range at his front door while his children are having dinner.
Justice David Opus was married to Kristen. They had 2 children, Joshua and Persia, who were then 8 and 6. A fearful Kristen asked that her face not be shown in full. She and David had been married for 10 years.
He was absolutely delightful. He had the most beautiful sense of humour. He was such a loving, loving father. Before the children arrived, he was a lovely boyfriend and then husband, and he was just full of life.
Did you have any reasons to be angry at Judge Opus?
No, I don't think so.
Did he preside over the early part of your divorce?
He did, yes.
1 month after Justice David Opus had briefly taken away Len Warwick's access to his daughter for defying court orders, someone came to the judge's front door.
The doorbell rang. Josh said to David,
"Don't answer the door, Daddy. Eat your tea."
He left the room, went out, shut the front door.
An alarm was going off in the street, muffling what happened next.
We waited and waited, and I said to the children, "That is a long time. I think I'll go out and see what's going on." I went out, opened the front door, and lying on the ground was David.
Justice Opus was shot with a .22 caliber long rifle. When you heard that Judge Opus had been murdered, what did you think?
He had involvement in it.
A judge murdered on his doorstep in front of his family.
Never before in Australian history have sitting judges been the target of lethal force in this country. Never before. That shows you the makeup of this person.
The murder happened at 7:10 p.m. 33-year-old Len Warwick had finished his firefighting shift at least 70 minutes earlier. There is no physical evidence linking Len Warwick to this crime scene. No blood, no fingerprints, no DNA. But minutes after the Opus murder, there is an eyewitness account of a man running away from the scene, carrying a long canvas bag with white handles. Under hypnosis, the witness described a man about 5'10" in height, 25 to 30 years old, of solid build, with dark hair and a medium complexion. This is the identikit shown at the inquest. Warwick's army record shows he was 5'8.5", with a solid build and olive skin. This is vision of Len Warwick 6 years after Justice Opus was killed. He has a moustache, but for all of his marriage, he was clean-shaven. So let's remove it. Here again is the identikit. Now let's add sunglasses and cap. Len Warwick refused a police request to appear in a police lineup before any witness. Andrea and Len Warwick had a very significant conversation in May of 1980, which she later detailed in evidence to the coroner's court. They were both appearing here before Justice Opus at what was then the Parramatta Family Court. During the luncheon adjournment, Warwick allegedly told Andrea she wouldn't have to worry about Justice Opus because he won't be there much longer. She said, "Why? Is he going on holidays?" Warwick allegedly replied, "No, he just won't be there at all." 5 weeks later, Justice Opus was dead.
Now, that's pretty compelling evidence that he intended to kill the judge.
Did you shoot him?
No, no.
Did you have any knowledge of it?
No, not at all.
You had no idea that might happen to him?
No.
Here at the fire station where Len Warwick worked, police did a search, and in a locker used by Warwick, they found news articles detailing the murder of Justice Opus. They also searched his home, where they found a number of firearms, none of them the murder weapon. Do you feel that the police at this stage were aggressively pursuing Len for the murder of Judge Opus and the murder of Stephen?
Yes. He was number one.
So he was their number one prime suspect?
Yeah, main number one suspect.
We suspected it was Len Warwick from the beginning, yes.
He knew that you knew it was him?
Yes.
And even when he knew you were on his tail, he still thought he could get away with it, didn't he?
Oh, absolutely, yes. He's a very clever man.
After Justice David Opus was murdered, Justice Richard G., a father of two, took over his family court caseload. Alison, his daughter, was 12 and scared.
Well, I knew that Justice Opus had been shot dead, and then Dad said they've offered me the job to replace him. And I just had this, well, I don't know, call it sixth sense that something was going to happen to us.
March 1984. Alison's mum was ill in hospital. Alison, her dad, and her 15-year-old brother Stephen were asleep at home.
I just heard a really loud clap of thunder, the loudest I'd ever heard. And then I turned into my room and I just went into shock. Just saw debris all covered in my room. My drawers had fallen in. Everything had just crashed into the centre of my room, and it was just like I'd woken up in a movie or a nightmare. I went into the hallway once I'd climbed over my furniture, and I just saw the hallway wasn't there anymore. It was just fully caved in.
Are you thinking about your father at this stage?
I did hope that Dad was okay. Stephen said, well, look, we'll find him once we get out of the house. So we went through his window. We went around the back of the house and we met Dad on the back deck. He was covered in debris dust. Over his whole body, he looked like a ghost, except that he had blood pouring down his legs from his thighs.
He'd been cut in his legs?
Yes, with glass. There was a beam that fell over my mum's side of the bed, which narrowly missed him.
Tell me what you thought as soon as you saw the front of your house.
I just cried. I just felt really sad. Just looks like a war zone.
In suburban Sydney?
Yeah.
Had Judge G ordered you to hand over your daughter to your former wife during the divorce?
I'm not too sure, Terry.
Justice G had previously issued orders for the sale of Len Warwick's home after his divorce. He restricted access to his daughter and even issued an arrest warrant when he failed to return Trudy after an access visit. When you heard about that bomb, What did you think?
I felt really sick that another person's been hurt. A week before that, we appeared in that court in front of him.
This was an attack on the administration of justice in Australia. Judges would make a ruling against him, and he responded with lethal force.
Sunday night, the following month. The family court at Parramatta is blown up. All of Warwick's proceedings were heard here. Miraculously, no one dies.
The bomb at the Parramatta court was set the night before he was due to appear there. He didn't want to appear there the next day, and he didn't. The bomb went off. The court was destroyed.
But the bombing doesn't stop. 3 months later, Justice Ray Watson, who's taken over from Justice G, is about to leave his Greenwich home for work. His wife, Pearl, is killed instantly.
Pearl Watson's bomb was at the front door. As soon as she opened that door, an inch, the bomb went off and blew her through the back wall.
Justice Watson survives. Their front door had been booby-trapped. The bomb exploded at 8:15 a.m. It contained several kilos of gelignite. Len Warwick's father was an expert in explosives and almost certainly passed that knowledge on to his son. So there's no doubt in your mind he knew how to make a bomb.
Absolutely.
When you heard that the wife of a judge had been murdered, what was your reaction?
Shocked. Hurt. Another person's been hurt because of it. Another family's destroyed. I can't get over it. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, darling. That's okay. I'm sorry.
Justice Watson left hospital to attend his wife's funeral. In March, he'd made orders restricting Len Warwick's access to his daughter. The police have said that it's a mathematical improbability that the same person was the common link in so many explosions and murders.
Mm-hmm. And every time we appeared in front of each judge.
The only thing that connected all of those crimes was Len Warwick.
Yes, that's true. I believe that he is the manifestation of pure evil.
After Pearl Watson's death,
family court judges,
Bob Hawke and New South Wales Premier Neville Wran offered a $500,000 reward.
We don't intend to stand idly by and tolerate these sorts of attacks, not merely on individuals, but on the very basis of the system that operates in this community.
A joint federal state police task force was also established. All eyes were now focused on the prime suspect.
We had federal surveillance officers and state surveillance officers. We used up virtually every surveillance officer in New South Wales and Australia.
But no matter how hard they tried, the police couldn't catch him in the act. Warwick thought he was invincible. In 1985, another bomb was found under the bonnet of a car outside a house here in Northmead, near Parramatta. The intended victim had recently moved from the address, but was still listed in the phone book. The significance of it was that the car was outside the home of what used to be the house of your then family court solicitor, Mr. Watts.
Yes. Yes.
And a bomb was placed in that car. This is while our task force was still going.
What did Mr. Watts say to you at the time?
I got a phone call and he said I won't be able to, act on your behalf, and that was it.
Basically, he was saying he was too frightened for his own safety to act for you any longer.
That's right.
Have any knowledge of that?
No, Terry.
What sort of a person is this person? Was he mad?
He's absolutely mad. He's a psychopath.
But for many years, Len Warwick presented as a harmless retiree, living with his new wife in southwest Sydney. In 1985, his former wife, Andrea, was living in fear. On the 9th of February, Len came to her home and bashed her. That night, a bomb was planted in her lawyer's car. Andrea's sister Judy was also threatened.
Threatening phone calls to kill her and her children.
Who was making those phone calls?
Len.
Police said that it was a good idea for me to get out of Sydney because I was probably next on the list.
Judy belonged to a Jehovah's Witness congregation near where Len Warwick lived. She asked church members to help move her, Andrea, and Andrea's daughter to a secret location hundreds of kilometres away. Greg Hahn drove the removal van. Do you remember when you helped move Andrea's possessions?
Yes.
You came to her house. She opened the door.
Yep.
Do you remember anything about her features that day?
She had a black eye. Looked like she'd had some violence.
Did she say who'd done that to her?
Yes, she said it was Len who'd done this, were her words.
What I remember about that Sunday morning was it was spectacular. It was one of those mornings in Sydney in winter, you know, where the sky is blue, 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 not a cloud. The gum trees look fabulous.
Also, with Sue and Peter Schultz, in the Jehovah's Witness Hall that day were Graham and Joy Wykes, and 2 of their 3 daughters. Joy had been married to Graham for over 15 years.
He was always calm and loving, quiet man. But he could be lots of fun, yeah.
Was he a good father?
He was an excellent dad.
People, this week we're reading from John of 6 of 68.
There were 125 people in the church that day, including 25 children.
Therefore, Jesus said to the 12, "You do not want to go also, do you?"
It was an older building, so it was in the middle of July, so it was quite cold, and we were holding hands, and I thought, oh, his hand would be really cold. So we had a small rug over our knee, and I'd pulled it up over our hands, and he knew, of course, why I was doing it, to warm his hand, and he turned to me and whispered, "I love you." And that was the last thing I remember.
And we have believed.
Could you remember a bang?
No, your ears just went numb and...
Can you remember the flash?
Yeah, flash.
Heat?
I don't remember heat, no. Just a lot of debris and just bits of, like little fine bits of wood falling.
After the bomb, it was dead silent. There was no noise. The air started to thin out. It virtually blew half the Kingdom Hall away.
I thought, I'm having a nightmare. It must be a nightmare. So I started to call out for Peter because I thought if Peter will just wake me up, everything will be fine.
And then she started calling out in a sort of a muffled way, "Peter, Peter." Her upper lip was cut right across and was hanging down near her chin. Her eyes, her whole face, everything was swelling up so quickly. So I tried to tend to her. Just to the side of Sue was one of our friends, a woman, and she was calling out for her husband who was killed.
That's Graham.
That's Graham.
Graham Wykes dies instantly. Joy Wykes and Sue Schultz suffer terrible injuries. Dozens more are badly hurt. 14-year-old Elaine Whites is carried to an ambulance.
Were you looking for your mum and dad at that stage?
I knew where they were towards my left, and so I did look around as they were carrying me out then, and I did see a blanket sort of put out to cover, obviously, which I realised later was my dad's body.
And I heard one of the elders in our congregation say, her father Graham's died. And I prayed to God and said if that was the best thing, because he might have suffered and been in a lot of pain, that might have been the best thing.
I understand in 2 weeks' time, August the 2nd, you're about to celebrate your 16th anniversary.
That's right, yes. He was a fine, fine man, and he's missed out on life because somebody done a very bad thing.
It was obvious that he said it there with deliberate intent to kill probably the whole congregation, because the congregation of that church assisted Leonard Warwick's wife to take away the daughter and move them up the north coast to get away from Leonard Warwick.
The bomb was triggered by an alarm clock. The same explosives were used in the attempted car bombing of Andrea's lawyer 5 months earlier. The night before, there had been a break-in at the church.
I believe it was a recce because he was looking for somewhere to place his bomb. On that day, Leonard Warwick broke a pane of glass on a side window of the church. He reached in through that broken glass and there was a window winder. And he wound the window out so that he could gain access to the church. In so doing, he lacerated part of his body, and upon entering the church, in the dark, he's bled everywhere. It's important for people to understand that back in the 1980s, DNA evidence did not exist. We knew that that blood was O positive, but a large proportion of the society has, I think it's 38%, have O positive blood. So it wasn't sufficient to charge him.
It's just 4 minutes' drive from Len Warwick's then house in Casula to here, the Jehovah's Witness Hall.
The bombing of the Jehovah's Witness Hall, the same church, the same congregation which offered your wife a sanctuary. A lot of coincidences, isn't it, connecting with you?
Well, I now know about the activities of the Jehovah's Witnesses in relation to the hiding of my daughter. I didn't know that at the time.
He'd been asking people in the congregation where you and Andrea and Trudy were, hadn't he?
Yes, he did approach people in that congregation, and friends sort of contacted me and said that he's been making phone calls, asking where we are.
So you're saying that at the time of the church bombing, you didn't know of your wife's involvement with the Jehovah's Witness?
No.
You knew nothing about it?
No.
9 days after the deadly explosion, federal police went to Warwick's home with a search warrant. He refused to be interviewed and refused to give a blood sample. The police discovered 3 handwritten pages containing the phone numbers of prominent Jehovah's Witness members. After the bombing of the church hall, Andrea's life was in turmoil. In hiding and scared, she took the heartbreaking decision to hand her 7-year-old daughter, Trudy, back to Len. So you gave Len Warwick full-time custody of Trudy at that point?
Yes.
How was that decision?
I didn't want to do it, but I thought, well, maybe he'll leave everybody alone, leave us in peace. Maybe he might change with her and be appreciated to have his daughter with him.
Interesting then, isn't it? that ever since Trudy was given back to Len full-time...
Yeah, everything stopped.
Everything stopped.
Everything stopped.
For 35 years, Leonard Warwick literally thought he'd got away with murder.
Yes, I believe so. I believe that he thought he'd got away with it.
He thought he'd been able to beat you?
Yes, and I must face fact he had at that stage, yes.
So one of Australia's most violent serial murderers remained at large, and the cool, cunning prime suspect at the centre of the family court killing spree showed no signs of putting a foot wrong or changing his story. Leonard Warwick got lucky. He almost got away with it. But then we came calling.
We're recording you at the moment because what we are doing is preparing a story. Sir, obviously...
From the very first time he was called in for questioning, Len Warwick said little.
You were accused in a court of murder
stupid.
and bombings. You were the prime suspect.
No interest.
He consistently played one card, his right to silence, on the basis that his answers might incriminate him.
Why don't you make a comment? Why did you refuse to speak to the police?
For 5 years, Warwick was placed under constant surveillance. His car, home and phone were bugged. The police helicopter was used to track him when he went into the national park adjoining his then home. Warwick was seen carrying suspicious items. Police suspected he had a hiding place. They just didn't know where.
We got some information that Warwick used to frequent a cave in the national park near Helensburgh, which is where he was from.
Do you remember the name of the cave?
My memory was it was Jimmy the Black's cave.
Did you find the cave?
No, we didn't.
Is that the rocks up there?
Acting on information, we went to the bushland south of Sydney. Our guide, who knows Len Warwick, was a local who insisted on not being identified. He knows the area and knew of the cave. After 2 hours, he brought us to the spot police failed to find.
Well, the police couldn't find this cave, what they thought might have been Len Warwick's hideout. And it's not hard to see why. We only found it with the help of locals. But that's not all the locals have told us. We've uncovered quite extraordinary new evidence. We understand local youths knew that if you came into this forest just 2 kilometres from Len Warwick's then home, if you knew where to look, you could find and steal explosives.
In the mid-70s, demolition crews were blasting rock for a reservoir expansion close to Helensburgh, near Warwick's home. To those in the know, security was lax. Our guide revealed how on one occasion he and mates stole fuses, detonators and explosives. Len Warwick knew this place like the back of his hand. His father worked in a nearby mine where explosives were often used.
I know you don't want to talk to us, but there's a lot of people out there, victims, victims' families, your own daughter.
I'm not interested,
They want to know whether or not you did this.
Do you think that Len Warwick would be convicted today if we hadn't made that story?
I think it would be difficult. Your story convinced me. Your story set out very clearly and concisely in chronological order these horrific murders and bombings. And it brought to the attention of the hierarchy of the police force that these crimes did need some attention by the cold case unit.
Len Warwick, of course, knew nothing of this renewed interest, and also unknown to him, and at first forgotten by police, was his crucial mistake that was about to bring him down. It was buried deep inside a box of evidence here at the Sydney Police Centre. Remember, on the night before, a fatal bomb blast ripped apart the Jehovah's Witness Kingdom Hall in 1985, somebody had broken in, shattering a window, cutting themselves in the process. There was no DNA technology back then, but there is now. After years of killing everybody in his way, it would be a self-inflicted wound that would bring Leonard Warwick undone. 30 years later, the Cold Case Unit found the long-forgotten blood. They sent it to an independent laboratory,
who analysed the blood and compared it with a blood sample from Leonard Warwick's daughter and found that the samples were identical. The DNA evidence was the conclusive part that left no doubt that he was the offender.
Warwick thought he was invincible. He never saw it coming. 12,819 days after Judge David Opus was shot dead on his doorstep, the family court bomber, the man who left so many dead and so many more living in fear, was finally taken down.
About 11:30 this morning, we arrested a 68-year-old man in relation to 7 incidents that occurred between February 1980 and July 1985. These incidents include 4 murders and a number of attempted murders. There will be 32 charges laid against that individual, including 4 murder charges.
The New South Wales Police Cold Case Unit had done their job and got their man.
You need to realise the door will never be closed on a murder investigation.
Len Warwick, finally a captive, but still no contrition. Defiant to the end. As defiant as he was the day I confronted him.
How could you have lived with yourself for the last 30 years? And how did you get away with it?
Leonard Warwick showed no remorse, no guilt, no empathy towards his victims whatsoever. He stopped at nothing.
After his arrest came his trial. Before Justice Peter Garling, Len Warwick's lawyers argued he was innocent. The family court bomber was someone else.
Well, the cops
but Warwick was up against mountains of evidence. And the righteous anger of good men like Kevin Woods.
I was at the Supreme Court for 10 days and I was cross-examined for 8.
I realise doesn't know what to think. That you shitheads are desperate to try to improve your ratings. You're absolutely desperate, aren't you?
No, sir, what we are trying to do is we're trying to help your daughter and all of the victims of bombings and murders find out the answers.
My verdicts are as follows.
Did you murder Justice Opus?
That the accused did murder David Opus, I find and return a verdict of guilty. That on 6 March 1984, that the accused did, by the explosion of an explosive substance, destroy a building with intent to murder Richard G. I find and return a verdict of guilty.
You're absolutely desperate, aren't you?
On the 15th of April 1984, at Parramatta in the state of New South Wales, that the accused maliciously placed an explosive substance near a family Northport, Australia, with the intent to damage the said building. I find and return a verdict of guilty.
This was the justice system reasserting you do not get away with a blow at the heart of the justice system like Len Warwick tried.
Exactly right.
On count 6, that the accused on 4 July 1984 at Greenwich in the state of New South Wales did murder Pearl Watson, I find and return a verdict of guilty.
Did you murder Graham Wicks?
The accused did murder Graham Wicks, I find and return a verdict of guilty.
Did you murder Stephen Blanchard?
That the accused did murder Stephen Blanchard, I find the accused and return a verdict of not guilty.
It was a shock to many, including Kevin Woods. Not guilty of the murder of his brother-in-law, Stephen Blanchard. The brave young man who was executed with a single shot to his head after helping his sister escape Warwick's violence.
My gut feeling is that he murdered Stephen Blanchard, and I firmly believe he did. But what the test is here, that we failed to produce enough evidence to convince a judge beyond reasonable doubt that he had committed that offence.
Did he do it?
Yes, of course he did.
But Stephen Blanchard isn't the only mystery remaining tonight. There's a sinister new development. Did Leonard Warwick murder his own sister?
There's another mystery, isn't there, in this case? The sibling.
Yes.
Eileen Muriel Warwick.
Eileen Muriel Warwick, yes.
Where is she?
I don't know. We checked birth, deaths and marriages and taxation records and we just couldn't find it.
Do you think she's dead?
I won't make the call on that.
But there's no record of her leaving the country?
No, there's no record of her leaving the country.
There's no record of her marrying?
No.
There's no record of her dying?
No.
Len Warwick's sister has effectively disappeared off the face of the planet.
She has, yes. We couldn't find her, no.
In 1993, the father of Len and Eileen died. In his will, he left his son and daughter assets to be split evenly between them. Eileen hasn't been seen since.
I think for the purpose of history, it'd be great if Eileen, if she's still alive, did come forward.
If anyone out there knows of her whereabouts, you can contact us confidentially.
Leonard John Warwick, the family court bomber, will be sentenced on September 3rd, when justice will finally be served on this serial-killing madman.
If you could imagine everything that means anything to you being taken away in 1 minute, everything. My best friend he was, the most beautiful father, just gone out of your life, and then your life is in total pieces.
We were in fear of our lives for years, and you can drive yourself nuts worrying about it. And I did.
He is going to have to go to jail and pay for all the distress and terror that he's caused everybody.
Guilty.
Leonard Warwick's 73, so he possibly will spend the remainder of his life in prison, which is where he deserves to be.
So you'd like to see him die in jail?
Yes.
Leonard Warwick, better known as the family court bomber, has been sentenced to life behind bars. Warwick terrorised Sydney in the 1980s, murdering 3 people, including a judge. But he was undone thanks in part to the reopening of the case by 7 News Spotlight investigative reporter Ross Coulthart.
I have no interest in promoting your funny little show.
Ross joins me now, and Ross, you were actually in the court as he was being sentenced. What was his reaction?
No remorse, no emotion. What he did do, the judge is talking to him from here, he turns and looks down like that. I'd love to think it was a shameful expression, you know, he's remorseful, but I don't think so. He'll never be remorseful.
And you are one of the few people who would know. You're one of the few people who've actually spoken to him. What is he like?
He's an evil grub. He's a monster. He's a man who is wired differently from the rest of us. Just because he was upset with family court judges because they'd done, he perceived, the wrong thing by him in relation to the custody of his daughter, he decided to set out on this murderous campaign, attacking, murdering judges. And then when he couldn't kill the judges. He thought, the Jehovah's Witnesses are helping my wife, I'm going to kill them as well. And he let a bomb off in a whole church of innocent parishioners, which is just absolutely outrageous. Let a bomb off outside the Parramatta family court. Incredible risks played with people's lives. And the tragedy is that to this day, he still says he's innocent, which he's not. The evidence against him is absolutely overwhelming. And he maintains this fiction that he's an innocent man, and quite frankly, he can rot in jail. I know for the families, the victims, and indeed for the people in the judiciary and the justice system, this man going down today is very, very important, because it was a blow right at the heart, Ange, of the administration of justice. It was an attack on democracy itself. And it's so important, even though, it's 35, 40 years since those crimes, it's so important that he's been brought to justice.
In that shot that we've seen of you, your interactions, was he an arrogant man? It certainly seems that way.
He called our show a crummy show, and he called me a maggot. He was really angry. I don't think he'd ever expected that somebody was going to catch up with him, because we'd been investigating him for months, and he had no idea. And what we'd done is we'd interviewed all the victims. We'd gone to America to interview somebody who was a victim in the Jehovah's Witness case. We'd gone all over the world to find people who were victims. And the thing that struck us when we were doing the research, I've never had a story before where we're going, oh my God. You know, we were literally looking at the evidence going, how can this guy not be in jail? The evidence was just overwhelming based on the circumstantial evidence. But then, I think as a result of our story, there was a moment when the police decided to review the evidence. They found a blood sample from the Jehovah's Witness church. He'd done a break-in at the Jehovah's Witness church, and he'd left blood at the scene. And because they hadn't been able to do that kind of DNA testing 40 years ago, they hadn't really put it through the right sort of tests. When they finally did, they got him. The DNA nailed him, and that was the moment for the police. A great bit of police work that finally brought this evil guy to justice.
Great police work, also great journalism. The judge acknowledged your reports helped police realise how much evidence they had. Do you think if it wasn't for police campaigning so heavily and your reporting, that he could still be a free man?
I dread the thought. I mean, I think it's nice to know that journalism can still be of use and is valued in society these days. It's really important. This is one story I'm very, very proud of. Certainly the police investigation was initiated after our report, and I think what our report did was it made people focus on the evidence. It made them sit back and go, hey, why haven't we cracked this case? And when they finally did go through the boxes of evidence and review the case with the help of a wonderful old detective who's become a mate of mine, Kevin Woods, they discovered they had an absolute ironclad case against this guy, and it was possible to bring an evil murderer to justice, which is fabulous.
Well, Ross, you're a humble man, but you deserve to be proud, along with those police officers. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks very much, Ange.